Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and we are here ready for another week of live interaction with you. So give us a call, won't you? 888-564-6173 is the number to call on this Tuesday afternoon. We're going to be here until 4 p.m. Pacific time, and we'd love to hear from you. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. You can send us your questions on Facebook Messenger or on Instagram, or you can mail a letter or do a singing telegram. We've never had one of those before. That'd be fun, but don't do it. Or you can go to the website of our flagship radio station, KWVE.com. It's been redesigned, and we have a Pastor's Perspective page, and on there you can fill out the form. So that's another way to get your question to us. But the best way is to give us a call so that we can hear your voice at 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today, we've got Brian Broderson, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. You also hear Brian on the Back to Basics radio program. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great, Brian.
I knew it.
You did?
Yes. Well, I had a feeling. I didn't know for sure. But
You could tell by the fact that I got this really cool blazer on.
Yes, and your hair doesn't look disheveled.
Good.
I'm trying to look like Bobby today.
Yes.
I thought I'm going to impersonate Bobby Conway today.
Yeah.
Put on
That
my
blazer looks good on you, bud.
Yeah, thanks. I actually had to do some filming, so I had to have
Ooh, what movie are you making?
Well, I'm just making my own movie about myself. You know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Yes.
me, myself, and I. The Me, Myself, and I film.
Yes. Can't wait till that hits theaters.
Yes, it's going to be awesome.
He could do a really good docuseries with Cheryl about the Jesus movement and about the whole founding of the Calvary Chapel. I think that would be fun. Interview lots of people. Like, that would be a great docuseries.
Well, I think we'll probably put that on the back burner.
Okay, fine. Bobby Conway, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really good. I've been in a little bit of an OCD mode. We've got this, concrete slab put down in our backyard, and I have been perusing the website, and I have looked at probably thousands of different couch patterns and stuff, and it's making me crazy. Like, just all the little details that have to be right. And I'm so aesthetically picky that it's driving me crazy. And then it's like, oh, it's going to take this long to get to you. And oh my goodness, you ever just feel like you're researching something that you need for your house, and you're doing all of your comps and you're looking for your reviews, and it just starts making you crazy. Like, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I never had that problem myself. No.
Never.
No.
Even when you're just buying, when you have to replace something, like a refrigerator or something, and you're reading all the different.
That's what I have Cheryl for.
Oh.
She does. She does all that stuff. And she's
Perfect.
amazing. She's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I'm convinced if it wasn't for Cheryl, the house would have just fallen down around me. But she keeps us going. She says, oh, we need to remodel the kitchen. I'm like, why? It looks fine to me. But then she comes up with a great plan, and she's so good at all of that stuff. So, and she's very decisive.
Yeah.
She's very, she's not having those kinds of issues that you are. Probably she knows what she wants. She gets very this is it. This is what I want to do. These are the colors. These are the patterns, and let's do it. Okay. I just
I think
there and
my
nod and
problem
say, okay.
is I'm a bit of a metrosexual, and so it kind of interferes with all of the design and stuff. Like I'm very picky, so my wife and I get into decor together, and we love picking out stuff. So, that's just me being in touch with my bride. So you probably really let your wife down in that way. Just let her carry that burden alone.
No, I think she appreciates the fact that I don't interfere. That I just
You stay on.
I just give her the nod. I decided about myself that I can look at something and tell you that it's great, but I couldn't figure it out beforehand. Like Cheryl can just see, she'll just walk into a room and then she'll say, I want to do this, I want to do that. Wallpaper needs to be there. This color paint needs to be there. And I'm like, hey, everything you've done our whole lives always looks good, so go for it. I believe that will look great. And it does. It ends up looking really good.
She hasn't let you down yet. She probably won't.
No, she hasn't. We have a joke because we heard this a long time ago, and I can't even remember what the context was, but it was an old couple, and the wife passed away, and the man in his comment about his wife of 50, 60 years, whatever it was, he said, well, the first thing he said about her was she was a hard worker. And so that's kind of our joke thing. It's like, if you go before me, I'm going to tell everybody you were a hard worker. But he kind of said it like, dang, now I got to do the work because she's gone.
Yeah. Yep.
She did it all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
All right, folks, give us a call, 888-564-6173. And we'll start with a question that was sent in on the form that I was talking about on KWVE.com. This was sent in from Annie. And Annie writes, "Hi, this is for Pastor Brian. I live in London. We have been grappling, might be the way to say it, about whether or not as Christians we should have taken the optional oath of allegiance to King Charles. I think it's okay, but it's caused quite a bit of controversy. I think it's allegiance to his office rather than him as a person, whatever we think of his morals. Not sure if it's any different to what American citizens do in swearing allegiance to a flag. I know that our ultimate allegiance is to the King of Kings. What are your thoughts? I always like to hear your perspective on all things British." Now, for anybody who doesn't know what the allegiance was to King Charles when he was crowned a few weeks ago, it's, "I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law, so help me God." So, Brian, what do you think of this?
Well, I think it's fine. I don't think that there's any violation of anything biblical there. Of course, the Bible tells us to honor those in those kinds of positions. Give honor to whom honor is due. Honor the king, it says. And so I think this is a way of honoring the king, not unlike we would do, the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that. I was listening to somebody yesterday, a theologian, and he was talking about how he can't say the Pledge of Allegiance. If he goes to like a sporting event and they're going to do the national anthem, because it's awkward if he's just standing there not, participating, he usually tries to exit and go to the bathroom or something just before so he doesn't have to participate in singing it. And I think, I don't know. For me, that was a little bit over the top. I do have a conviction about having those kinds of things inside of a church. When I became the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, we had an American flag on the stage, and I took it off because I feel like this is not the place for that. We have a campus, we have a flagpole, we have a flag here. We have a school. And I don't believe that saying the Pledge of Allegiance is in any kind of violation of your Christian faith. It's just a matter of she understands who the real authority is. And of course, ultimately, the real authority is the Lord, and we honor him above everyone else. But we can honor the king, and we can honor the president, if you will. We can honor those in civil authority, and we should do that. And of course, if there comes a point where the king was requiring you to do something that would be a violation of your faith, then obviously you wouldn't do that.
Right.
That's not the case. What do you think, Bobby?
I agree. I concur. That was a great answer.
Annie, thanks for sending that in online.
And I'm happy to answer all things British because, I love British.
What's going on with Parliament? What's going on with...
I am going to Britain next week. Did I tell you that?
No.
We need to have a conversation.
We need to have a conversation. All right. And Bobby's not here Thursday. Tony's not here today.
I'll be here Thursday. But
okay, good.
A week from today, I will be on my way to London.
Okay.
Okay.
We will get that squared away. Richard or John will be in town still, so we can...
No, Richard will be with me.
Richard will be with you. Okay. So calling out to John Wong.
Yes.
Better come in, John.
John's going to have double duty.
Yes. Perfect. All right. 888-564-6173. Here's another one that was sent in. This one from Nicole. I know God has a plan for everyone's life. And I questioned myself about my fiance and I feeding the homeless every Sunday. I'm wondering if I'm going against God by feeding them because maybe that is the plan God has for them, and I could be interrupting the journey. So I worry about that, but I was raised to never deny a stranger because it could be an angel. Please help me understand. Bobby, what would you say to Nicole?
I think lots of Christians have felt torn because of that verse, entertaining angels unaware. I do think that we could realize that an angel's not going to ask us to do anything that would compromise our biblical convictions, but feeding people, I think that that's a wonderful thing. As far as just putting money in the hands of the homeless, that might be something else for people to think about. You know, I've went back and forth on this issue throughout my 30 years as a Christian, and I can honestly say I've had some pretty rough experiences in helping the homeless, which has really been disturbing at times, where the entitlement was through the roof. I remember one time I found this homeless person in downtown Charlotte, and she ended up coming to church, and I was praying with her. I went and got her a hotel room, and then she came to the church, and then stood up and gave praise to God at the church, and then we ended up getting her a car. And then she destroyed the car, and then she started making demands and getting mad and coming at us. Another time I picked up a couple homeless people, took them to a hotel, checked them in, got them a couple nights to be established, and then got a phone call that these guys completely destroyed the property, the room, just left it totally devastated. And all that to say, those are just two examples of times where I tried to help and I felt like, wow. So for me, I don't want to put money in the hands of the homeless. I do think the church should be a part of a strategy. There needs to be something done, obviously. We're in bad shape in California. It's horrific. But I think getting somebody a meal can be maybe the best thing. Last week, a homeless lady and a child was outside of the grocery store, and I did that. I said, well, would you like a cup of coffee? Because I was going into Starbucks in the store, and she said, yes. Then she came in. I said, would you like anything to eat? And so she picked something out. I think when you're paying for the very thing that they want, that can work out great. I think being aware of different shelters in the area, different places where they can connect is also a good thing. But I do fear that if you give them too much too quick, or if you put, just actual resources in their hand, you can have some of these stories like I have had. That's not to say, unfortunately, there's some people that are truly hurting and they would just appreciate it and use it in a great way. But sadly, there are bad apples that ruin it for the others.
Any thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, I do have thoughts about that. I think that one of the problems, I think even the term homeless is misleading. And I think obviously there are people who are truly down and out, people who have been forced into situations that they really don't want to be in, and they are just looking for an opportunity to get themselves out of that. But, there are a whole lot of people who take pride in living on the streets. They take pride in the lifestyle that they have of no attachment to anything. Oftentimes they're committed to being regularly intoxicated or under the influence of drugs. And I of course, being in the ministry for so many years, dealt with almost every imaginable kind of situation. And I've come to a point where there are people that I think you can help and you should help, and people who want help, but there's a whole group of people that are completely entitled. They don't want to change. They don't want to get their life together. They want to keep living the way they're living, and they want you to fund them. And I think that we don't have any obligation to do that. So I think we need to be really wise about who we help. And so I know people will accuse me of being hard-hearted and, a horrible person, and don't you have any compassion and all that. But there is a place where people have to take responsibility. Mm-hmm. And like you said, Bobby, and I've had the same experience where, you try to help people, you try to do the right thing for them, and they end up like ransacking the hotel room or that kind of stuff. That is not uncommon. That happens frequently.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate that it does. And I do feel like, churches, if they have a proper process in place, and you guys probably have something, hey, what happens if a homeless person comes on Calvary Chapel campus? What's the process like? Obviously, first attention is going to go to those who are a part of the church. But typically, even with benevolence inside the church, the way that churches will function is you don't just give money to people who maybe not even homeless, just financially struggling. You sit down with them, you try to help them assess how they got there. You come up with a plan, you give them some budgeting skills, you want to look at the budget, and then you give a certain amount of help for a certain amount of time because the goal is not to be dependent upon the church. Yeah. And that's the part that is dangerous with the homeless community is they don't want to work. They want to be dependent on handouts, and that can be very dangerous. Now, there are people that are out there, no doubt. I mean, they're just absolutely vexed by life. They're so torn up with PTSD. Maybe they've had something horrifically tragic happening, losing all their loved ones in a space of a year. And they're so empty, they can't hardly do anything. Depression's got a hold of them. How do you discern that is one thing. So I think before if you feel like, oh my goodness, this person's really being legit, you get at that through asking questions, listening to their story, finding out how serious they are about getting help versus just here's some money, like with somebody waiting at a stoplight where you don't know their story, you don't know their motivation, you don't know how long they've been out there, you don't know why they're out there, you don't know if they want to remain out there. And I think that's why we need a lot of wisdom to come into the situation.
Nicole, thank you for sending in your question on our contact form on KWVE.com, our flagship radio station's website. All right, let's go to the phones now. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Pastor's Perspective is the name of the program. I'm Brian Perez. Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway are answering your questions. Give us a call, whether you're listening on our flagship station, KWVE, or our sister station, KSTW, maybe back east on Equip-FM, or in Texas on Living Way Radio. Or maybe you're catching us on a podcast or Facebook or YouTube. So many different ways to listen nowadays. It's awesome. Delina in California, welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. So, would you like me to ask the question as the young lady that you guys had it on the board? Okay, excellent. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
So, just, I guess, a quick question. So, like how 2 Timothy 3 talks about, how perilous times, in the end times, people will be lovers of themselves, families will be divided, all that bad stuff. So as a young person who has a heart for marriage, how do I discern having no hope for the future because of end times and Jesus' return seems pretty imminent versus my heart for marriage? It's really confusing, sometimes a little saddening, if you will. So I just guess I would like some understanding of why I have such a heart for marriage, but I'm also met with the juxtaposition of time is short. So,
do you have a boyfriend right now or a fiance, or you're just thinking in general?
Yeah, just in general. I'm currently a single woman, but it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, I'm going to Bible study, I'm getting connected with my church to serve, and, I'm like, okay, hopefully I find a spouse there, but then at the same token, I'm like, well, time seems like they're going to end pretty soon, maybe in the next couple weeks, next couple months, whatever. Should I even be focusing on that?
Maybe even right now.
Weird.
No, I guess not.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's just kind of weird, and it's kind of like I don't have hope to be married, and then I think like, okay, I can't make marriage my God, but then I have a heart for marriage, and it's really confusing if I'm being honest. So, yeah.
What do you tell Delina, Brian?
Well, Delina, I could tell you a lot of things. Number one, I had this conversation with people your age 40 years ago, when I was probably closer to your age, and the same dilemmas that you're expressing, friends around me were expressing. oh gosh, we want to get married, but we think the Lord is coming so soon, it'll probably be a mistake. And then finally they decided, well, I think maybe the Lord wants us together. And then the next thing was, well, the Lord has shown us not to have any kids because he's coming so soon. We don't have time to raise kids. The world's so evil. And of course they had kids and the Lord still hasn't come back. So here, this is kind of just where I'm at in regard to, I do not think, and I've just been reading the book of Revelation again the last few days. I do not think, though, the Lord ever intended for us to live with a mentality that we can't do the things that we dream to do or feel led to do because, after all, the Lord might come back. Because the reality is we do not know when the Lord's coming back. 40 years ago, we all thought the Lord's coming back, just like you said, like next week he's going to come back. And then, then a certain date came that we kind of had calculated and figured that, well, around this time, this is going to happen. And so now we really got to, it's just any time now. And the truth is, nobody knows the day or the hour when the Lord is going to return. The signs of the times, the signs of the times right now have been the same signs of the times for the past 50 years in many ways. Obviously, things are changed, and I think you could argue that things are worse than they've been in a lot of places. Some places, they've always been bad, so they didn't even have the luxury of thinking, well, we've gone from bad to worse. We've gone from good to bad. They are just, if anything, they just go from bad to worse. Mm-hmm. So I think if, like you said, you have this longing for marriage, you have this desire, then I think you should believe and ask the Lord and expect that he's probably going to lead you into a marital relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing sinful about that, unless God specifically shows you that, no, I've called you to singleness because this is what I want you to do. But if that were the case, you would bear witness with it, and you would say, I know people that are not married, have not been married, and guess what? They don't want to get married. They want to keep being in the position they're in because this is the place the Lord has them, and this is the place that the Lord is using them. So I know there's a ton of end times conversation out there. I believe in the end times. I believe Jesus is going to come back. I believe there's going to be a rapture. I believe all of that, but I just absolutely also believe that none of us know when that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so we should not try to figure it out, nor should we base our lives and our decisions and our thoughts about the future on, oh, well, we don't have time because the Lord is coming, because I listened to this guy and his, radio show or podcast or whatever it is, and he said this, and wow, look what's going on in Israel, and oh man, Russia's doing this, and all of that stuff. Again, that conversation has been going on for at least 40 years, and we're still here.
And not just with marriage, but there might be people, I better not go get a job because, why bother going to school?
You got other issues.
Yeah.
We were talking about them a minute ago. I don't want to get a job.
Yes.
But anything, well, as everybody knows, because we've talked about it, I went back to school 4 years ago, and who goes, first of all, who goes to school when they're 62? And, if I would have had the mentality like, well, Jesus is going to come back, I can't go to school. Mm-hmm. Well, I would be today, 4 years later, having not gone to school and Jesus hadn't come back.
Right.
So, Bobby, weigh in on this because I know you have a few opinions about this stuff.
Well, that's very helpful insight. I would say that what you said is spot on. And this is what I would encourage you, Delina, as well, that what Pastor Brian is saying is very true. That really since the first century, this has been the concern of people. But take, for example, the middle of the 14th century with the bubonic plague or the Black Death in Europe. It took out 75 to 200 million people. You talk about thinking the Lord's going to return. That's almost 2/3 of the United States taken out in a plague if it was on the high side of those numbers. So I would say what I really would encourage you to do is to find some hope in the future on earth. And sadly, my heart goes out to the young people today, because the message that you often hear, even from older people, is, I'd hate to be you. I'm glad I'm not going to have to be around here much longer. It doesn't look good. So you get a lot of negative messaging if you're a believer and you're young. You hear things like, you know what, the worst is yet to come for our country. You're going to be persecuted. You'll probably spend most of your life in jail. I mean, it's pretty depressing. And what I want to say is, see the time you're alive right now. Number one, God knows you're alive, and this is an opportune time, and there's a lot of hope. I mean, yes, it's getting darker out there, but the more dark it gets, the greater the light can shine. And so I would be living, to start shutting all these things down that you have desires in your heart. I'm guessing the Lord put a desire in your heart to get married. So I would really just rejoice on making the most of your life, making good plans, counting on the Lord to direct you, and making plans to live a long life. And if indeed the Lord comes, well, you won't have to worry about it. If he doesn't come, but something bad happens where, a crisis comes your way that some of the plans have to adjust, then that's okay. But resist trying to control certain things because of fears that you have rooted in hopelessness, and instead try to find faith rooted in a hope-filled future that allows you to make active decisions thinking about what the Lord would have in store for your future.
So what are you going to do now, Delina?
I think that's really good. It's funny because a lot of what y'all said gave me a new perspective. I think we have it really easy here in America compared to like what Brian Broderson said, like to maybe a country that's not as privileged. Mm-hmm. Like we see things going downhill and it's crazy, but it's worse in other parts of the world.
Oh my gosh.
Think about that.
Yes.
And that really helps.
Yeah.
And
good.
It's also funny because a lot of like the negativity, for lack of better words, kind of come from like my parents, like, oh man, you probably shouldn't get married and blah, blah, blah. And then I've also, on the other end, for some reason, I've been studying marriage. I've listened to like thousands of Christian podcasts, read hundreds of books since I was like 18, and I'm now 24. And it's like, why do I love marriage so much? And blah, blah, blah. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And listen, if you get married and have some kids, your parents are going to be thanking you a million times over that you made them grandparents. Right. Oh, thank you so much. We love our grandchildren. All right, Delina, great to talk to you. Glad you were encouraged. Okay. God bless. Okay, I want to keep going on this.
Go for it. We've got a minute
on this for a second, and with Bobby. So seriously, Bobby, I'm reading Revelation recently again, and I'm just thinking like, I just do not think the Lord ever intended that we were to read this and then draw the conclusion like I'm paralyzed because Jesus is going to come anytime, and I just, I don't know what to do. That never was the intention of God giving us his word. I don't think he ever intended that we sit down and try to figure out when it's all going to happen. I think he's just telling us this is what's going to happen. It will happen in his time, and we need to live to the fullest of our potential with Christ and glorify him and trust him for the day and the hour. He's the only one.
And if you become a post-trib, guys, then at least if she gets married, she can have 7-year crack at it.
Good point. Back with more on Pastor's Perspective. Stand by. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. Thanks so much for watching on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for listening on the radio. We are here till 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 16th of May. We'd love to hear from you. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway here to answer your questions. 888-564-6173 is the phone number. And, okay, let's go to the phones now. Carol hung up. Okay, so let's go to Kate in Colorado. Hey, Kate, question on Ephesians what?
6:12.
6:12, where we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. What did you want to know about that?
Well, first I want to say thanks for taking my call. I appreciate all the help I've received. I used to be in Sterling, and now I'm in Westminster, Colorado.
Oh, okay. Maybe you'll be in Westminster, California one day, too.
I've been there.
Oh, nice.
I used to go to Saddleback Church.
Okay.
Anyway, on this, every time I hear it preached, they will skip over 6:12 and go right to all the armor. And I have struggled with this for some time, and I've come from a real bad background, and I was raped and beaten, and I'm trying to understand, is that coming from the unbeliever, or is that Satan using them? I mean, Satan can use believers also, but I'm trying to separate the person that's abusing me from understanding that it's come from Satan, not from the person that's abusing me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bobby, what would you say?
Well, I would say on one side, we have to be careful when we look at a verse like that, because it says that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. And then it kind of throws the problem to the unseen realm where the principalities and powers abide. If you take that ultra literally in a wooden sense, then really there's no human culpability. Like there's really, no one to blame amongst our fellow humanity, because, it's the principalities and powers. That's where all the problems come from. And I would say that we know that, our three enemies are the world, the flesh, and the devil. Well, then what do you do with enemy number two, the flesh, if, our battle's not against flesh and blood? And so I would say, remembering Paul in the book of Ephesians, I do think that our battle, as it is, seeking to advance the gospel, and then when he gets down to the bottom of that passage, he's talking about, living out a life of faith, contextualizing the gospel, and, the battle that we're up against is a spiritual one. So I do think on that level, there is a real battle spiritually as it relates to advancing the gospel. But I think that behind our fallenness, yes, there is an evil one at work. So perhaps maybe a way of seeing this is, don't just think that all of our problems are reducible to flesh and blood. We have bigger issues, and these issues emerge from the unseen realm.
Brian, any thoughts?
Well, no, I think Bobby answered it perfectly.
Perfect. Kate, thanks for calling us today from Colorado. 888-564-6173 is the number. Let me do another one sent in online, this one from Facebook. Kathy and Paul wrote in, let's say a physician who is an atheist is in a consultation with an individual who has a new diagnosis of end-stage colon cancer. This physician demonstrates empathy and mercy by carefully and gently explaining the treatment options and answers all the questions of the individual who is emotionally fragile at the moment. Will God then extend mercy in a specific way to the atheist? This question stems from listening to a pastor talking about how the Bible speaks of showing mercy and then having mercy extended back from the Lord. So if an atheist gives mercy to somebody, will the Lord give mercy on the atheist, is what the question is. Brian, what do you say?
Well, I mean, it just depends on what you mean by mercy. Of course, there could be incidents in life where God would have mercy on a person like that, but that doesn't change the fact that they are an atheist, and that in the end, unless they turn from their atheism to trusting in Christ, there will not be the kind of mercy that's going to allow them into the kingdom of God for eternity. So, and I would imagine that there's probably many, many mercies that have already been shown to them in their life. And I think, a person who has that kind of sensitivity, that's a great thing. Whether you're a believer or an unbeliever, that's a great thing. Sometimes, though, that is the result of having experienced that yourself. So maybe they just need to pray for that particular person, that they experience mercy on the ultimate level of the mercy of God through their coming to recognize Jesus as their Savior.
Mm-hmm. All right. Kathy and Paul, thanks for sending in your question on Facebook. Let's go back to the phones. We started the program talking about the King of England, and now Connie's calling with a question about the Queen of Heaven. Is there a Queen of Heaven, she wants to know. Hi there, Connie. Welcome to the program.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, so...
Jeremiah. Say that again.
Go ahead. Your turn. Jeremiah 44, you said.
Yes. Verses 24 to 25. It says here, then Jeremiah said to them all, including the women, listen to this message from the Lord, all you citizens of Judah who live in Egypt. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says. You and all your wives have said, we will keep our promises to burn incense and pour out liquid offerings to the Queen of Heaven, and you have proved by your actions that you meant it. So go ahead and carry out your promises and vows to her. So is there a Queen of Heaven?
There was a Babylonian idea that there was a Queen of Heaven, which would have been a false deity. And so to worship the Queen of Heaven was to engage in idolatry. So there is no actual Queen of Heaven. Among Catholics, sometimes you will hear Catholics refer to Mary as the Queen of Heaven, but there's no biblical references that would put Mary in a position of being the Queen of Heaven. There's the King of Glory, and there's no queen in that kind of a sense. The church is the bride of Christ. Israel is the wife of the Lord. But there's never any legitimate references to a figure who is the actual Queen of Heaven.
What is that? Is that your phone? Oh, Pastor Brian's phone just went off. Remember to silence your cell phones before you go on the program. Got to start doing a disclaimer now, like they do at church. Silence your cell phones.
And it's a French bulldog trying to get a cat's tail. That's what we were.
Sure, why not? Connie, thanks for calling in today on Pastor's Perspective. Oh, that's
there it is.
Really cute. There's your
look at that. Oh yeah,
camera.
Look how cute that is.
Yes.
My daughter has a French bulldog, and they're just the craziest little creatures.
So we see.
Yes.
All right, Gilbert in California, you're next on Pastor's Perspective with a question about Matthew 17:21. Go ahead, Gilbert. Oh boy, I think Gilbert's listening on delay there, so we'll have to come back to Gilbert. Remember to turn off your radios when we go to you, or if you're listening on the app, turn off your app if you're on hold. Laura, let's go to you. Hi there, Laura. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Thank you for taking my call, and I have actually two comments. One of them is, I've always told my daughter since she was a baby, dance with God and he'll let the right man cut in. That's what I've always told her.
Well, I think that's good advice.
Has it worked?
Yes, because she does now have a boyfriend, and this is what my question is now, because I don't know how to answer it to her. So the question is, he has just given her a promise ring after a year, and they want to get married, but she says, I want to know what equally yoked means, and I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, so tell us about this boy. Is he a believer?
You know what? I'm going to tell you, when we were sitting down having dinner, her and I always say something, and we always finish it with "Thank you, God." He doesn't say anything. He just keeps quiet. He's not one for wanting to go to church. And she says, we got to have counseling before we go to church, because this is a serious step. She's 27 years old, and she's very serious. So she asked me, what does that mean? And I told her, I don't know. So you guys have helped me before. You've talked to me before. And so
okay.
That's my question. What does equally yoked mean?
Bobby, let's start with you on this one.
2 Corinthians 6:14 uses that language. It's not in the context of marriage, but it's referring to, being yoked up with non-believers. But the principle would certainly apply that you don't want to yoke your life up in a marriage with a non-believer. So if the principle would apply for us in being cautious in our interactions with unbelievers, how much more so would it be to go into a covenant in marriage? And so that's why people will often use that. I would say on one side, if the promise ring for her means that she is, preserving herself for marriage, that's a noble ideal. That's where the Bible puts, sexuality to take place in the context of marriage. But what you're sharing with me, I would just say, if that was me and I was the dad and this person was completely detached on things spiritually, wasn't going to church, I would be telling my daughter to run as fast as possible. You can be friends and you can do all that, but this is nothing to mess around with in marriage. When you're talking about marrying somebody, you're not, you don't want to go into marriage with somebody where you're having to spur them on to grow spiritually. You want to come, you want to find somebody that's ripe and ready to go and walk with Jesus. That's not to say that there's never been any fruit that's been born out of missionary dating, but that doesn't mean that missionary dating is the way to go. It just means that God is gracious to us, even when we make moves that aren't perfectly in alignment with the way he would have us operate. So given what you said, I would encourage her to run as fast as possible. And what that would look like for me, if I was, encouraging my daughter, is I would just say, look, I get it. This person's attached to you. He likes you. That's wonderful. I want to encourage you just to take a break. Just give it some space. Give it 6 months. See what happens with him. See where he goes. And then, you can pick up the phone and chat and see where things are 6 months from now. But really remove the power from the relationship. And she needs to be very, very careful. We talk a lot about physical, connection that can happen, but especially sharing things emotionally with him can make her feel very, very close, and it can make it hard for her to detach. And she can feel like maybe God's even in it. Just because she has certain good feelings toward him, it doesn't mean necessarily that God's bringing them together.
Brian? Nothing?
Nope.
Okay. Bobby took the words right out of your mouth.
He did. He did a thorough job.
That's right. Yep.
Laura, does this help you?
So, yeah, it does a lot. And I told her, do you think he's the one? And she says, yeah, but, getting married, you and me and her dad were married many years before God called him home. And, so I always told her, let God, just dance with God. And, and she says, well, now I don't know. And so now I know how to answer her.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're dancing with God, or she's dancing with God, but he's not. And so God's not going to bring someone into the life that's not, it's not happening with him.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. All right. 888-564-6173. Let's try Gilbert again. Go ahead, Gilbert.
Yes, I'm calling because I was just kind of curious why in a lot of translations of the Bible, in Mark 17:21 is
Wait. Mark 7? There is no Mark 17.
I believe Matthew 7.
Matthew 17. Okay.
It goes from 20 to 22, and a lot of the different translations of the Bible, it's all the same. I think about the only one that has it is King James, where it says to get into prayer and fasting. But in other translations, it don't say that. It just gets from 20 to 21.
All right. So, Brian, what do you tell Gilbert?
Yeah, the issue is a manuscript issue. So the manuscripts, all translations with the exception of the King James and New King James are based on a set of manuscripts that are different. So all the new translations are based on what's called the critical text, and the King James and the New King James are based upon what is sometimes called the Textus Receptus, sometimes the majority text. And so in the critical text, that reference to prayer and fasting doesn't appear. So that's why it doesn't appear in the majority of new translations. So the question is which text is accurate? Is the Textus Receptus? Is it that somebody wrongfully inserted prayer and fasting because they thought that needed to be added? Or in the critical text, is it, no, it was actually in the original text, but in the critical text they removed it because they thought that it shouldn't be there because it smacked of asceticism and some of these kind of more Greek type of ideas. So that's the debate, and it's hard to say who is right when it comes to these issues, these scholarly issues about the various texts. But that's the reason why you have one version that has it and the rest of the versions that don't.
All right, Gilbert, thank you for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective, 888-564-6173. Karen in California, you had a question about Matthew chapter 19. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much for taking my call. I've heard the transgender community take Matthew 19:12, for there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which are made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. And so I've heard the transgender community use this verse to say, see, transgenderism, gender-affirming surgery, it's in the Bible. It's nothing new. What do you have to say about that?
Bobby Conway. We'll give you this one.
Yeah. Well, it's true. The transgender community, some would leverage that, but the whole purpose of some making themselves eunuch for the kingdom of God, note, kind of how sacrilegious it would be that to take that and say, oh yeah, be transgender. It's kind of like some people have separated themselves to live a life of singleness for the kingdom of God. So they live eunuch-like. So there's some that would say, oh, they were literally made eunuchs for the kingdom of God. But others would say, no, they just acted like eunuchs would for the sake of the kingdom of God. Whichever stance you take, the whole purpose is that these people wanted to live motivated sexually for the kingdom of God. When you think modern day transgender, they're not thinking about giving up having sex for the kingdom. They're wanting to be very active in being sexual. I think it is important that the church has a posture toward this. And I've read several books in the last couple of weeks on transgenderism. I'm working through my third book by Mark Yarhouse right now. It was written to clinicians, but it's fascinating to me because as a pastor, I just want to think clinically a little bit about some of the things that are offered up. One of the things that Yarhouse did offer as a template model that I think can be helpful for the church is he talks about how when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, in that book, Understanding Gender Dysphoria, I just read too, but he says there are people who approach this from an integrity posture, others from a disability posture, and then those from a diversity posture. And then on the diversity, there's a weak and strong form. So if you're listening on the radio or at home, think of it like this. You're aware of the LGBTQ plus community. If you are approaching it from the integrity model, then maybe it's very much about theology and it's always a moral issue. It's very black and white. It's sinful. They need to deal with it. If you're approaching it from a disability angle, it's not sinful necessarily. It's the fact that this person's born, they're just conflicted. It could be the 12-year-old that's heard all kinds of messages coming their way, and they're not trying to be sinful at all. They're just confused. In fact, 1 in 4 Gen Zs struggle with sexual identity issues. So this kind of looks at it, and then also concedes that all of us have disabilities in different ways. There's just a dysfunction here as it relates to a person figuring themselves out sexually. And then the diversity piece, on the strong diversity side, that would relate to really your progressive LGBTQ. They want to topple marriage. They want to overthrow gender distinctions. And it's all about celebrating. And so on a weaker side of that, you would appreciate that there's different people that are made different ways. And so Yarhouse goes on to say, as a church, if we look at things just from an integrity model, the LGBTQ community will never come. They'll always just feel shame. Why is it that, what are they looking for? They're looking for community, and they're looking for a place of identity. The LGBTQ community gives them that. And so so this all then unfolds for Yarhouse, where he says there's three different types of counseling approaches. You'll have the approach like Exodus International, where you try to get people to lose their sexual orientation, and that's largely been dismissed. But then there is the gender affirming model, which it's just affirm what you want, be what you want. And that's kind of what you see with the progressive movement. And then he talks about a model of sexual identity and working with people to try to find where they're at. So long answer, but I think that that's a good author for us to read. And I think for me, it's been helpful because I've often approached it on that integrity model. And I'm going, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of these young kids. They're not thinking about this sinfully. They're just getting lots of messages coming. They're confused and they need a safe place to show up and process.
So this author that Bobby's talking about, again, his name is Mark Yarhouse, not Yardhouse, but Yardhouse without a D. Yarhouse, and the book is Understanding Gender Dysphoria. And is this the other book that you recently read, Bobby? The other one I pulled up on the tab here? Is this the one? It looks like he's written a few.
Yes, I read that one. And then I think you had another one up as well that I'm going through that's kind of aimed toward clinicians. So it's a little bit more top heavy, but I actually like it because it's letting you see where the research is at and the different ways that people counsel people.
You know, what's interesting about Mark too is he's a solid, Christian brother, and yet he is highly respected in the secular world. That his opinion about these things is taken seriously, which I think is a good thing. But going back to the Matthew passage for a moment, the other thing I would just add, Bobby, is that basically the idea of a eunuch was to become more or less sexless. You weren't changing your sex from one thing to another. It was a way of living a life that did not engage in sexual behavior. So in some cases, a eunuch was a person who was castrated. And in certain cultural contexts, it was mandatory because of the position they held in the kingdom. They had to be eunuchs for the protection of the harem and different things like that. So of course, all throughout the history of the LGBT movement, there are two different approaches to the Bible. Some just completely dismiss it out of hand and say it's irrelevant, we don't believe it, who cares what it says. Others have tried to find some biblical support for same-sex relations, for that kind of thing, and now for transgenderism. So there's nothing new. But I think, Bobby, what you said is really good. I think we have to see it in the end. I think to make a decision and to go that direction is sinful in as much as you're not submitting your life to the God who made you and the way that God made you. But I do think a lot of it's not intentionally sinful in the sense that they're not thinking in those terms. They're just thinking simply in the terms of, I don't know what I am. I'm confused, and I think I should maybe go this way and try to be this. And the culture. And I think beyond the culture, you have the principalities and powers. You have the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that's working in the children of disobedience. It's what's in the air that the enemy is, he's deceiving people about these things, and people are buying into it because they don't know that there is actually a truth about your biology. There's a truth about who you are. It's the truth that God made you, and he made you this way.
There's the music. Bobby, 20 seconds.
Well, I would say that as churches, if it's true that 1 in 4 of Gen Zs are struggling with sexual confusion, this means that there's 1 in 4 parents that are out there wondering what to do. And so we're going to be developing a course called Gender, Sexuality, and Identity. And we want to offer that once or twice a year to parents and their children that might be struggling with this, or others who just want to be informed, so that we can dialogue about how to move forward. And I think that could be a helpful discipleship model for all churches to take up to address these issues.
Are you going to put that on the church's website or on ChristianityStillMakesSense.com?
We'll do radio stuff on Christianity Still Makes Sense, so people can have access to that for sure.
Awesome. All right, that's all the time we have today. Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.